Yeah.
A hug.
Yes, sir. You got it, man.
Get those buckets passed around out there. Hi, everybody. I'm Bud. It's great. Can we do it one more time? I just love it. Hi, everybody. I'm Bud. I don't know. I love that. You know, you get to hear your name. I think you get endorphins or something when you hear your name, especially like a big crowd like this. My name is Bud. I'm from Deering, New Hampshire. My home group is the Antrim Wednesday night step study. If you're in the area, stop by. If you're on your way to France. I have a list of people to thank. I always get worked up and forget stuff you're supposed to do. I want to thank people. I want to thank the committee for having me here. I want to thank Jason, who's been great. He's been texting me, got me a shirt, he got me a mug. I want to thank Patty for asking me to be here. Thank you, Patty. And I want to thank Ara for being my hostess. She came to the airport and picked me up and drove 2.5 hours. I left yesterday woke up at 3:20 in the morning, got here 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So it was like 12 hours. I went to Philly. I went to Phoenix. I went to Sacramento. I rode in the car for 2.5 hours, listened to Lawrence of Torrance, and crashed. And it was, and the thing is, you know, they always say you need to go to any lengths, and that was close to it. I was so happy to be able to get here to hear Larsine talk in the last 15 minutes with Larsine. I love Larsine. It was she's always got a terrific talk. And then Lawrence of Torrance last night, it was particularly funny and touching and poignant. And just now we got to hear Matt. And I got to tell you, Matt, I'm so glad you're out of the thieving business. Because you look like the kind of guy who would steal your wallet but help you for 2 hours to find it, right? I'll help you, dude. It's like, oh, he's such a nice guy. And I'm looking forward to hearing Jennifer and Judge John. And I got a great gift basket in my room, which was terrific. I dug through it. I got a nice mug and a shirt. They also gave me Kleenex. I don't know if that was just an Al-Anon thing. You know, you always see a Kleenex box, right, when you walk to an Al-Anon meeting, and you're almost sure they don't do it at AA, but boy, in Al-Anon, you got all these Kleenex boxes everywhere. So thank you for that. And I want to thank my partner, Molly. She, you know, has to put up with me being gone and driving me to the airport and picking me up at airports, and she's not in program, and she doesn't quite understand what I do, but she's very supportive, and without her, I couldn't be here. There, I did my thanking parts. I always like to start my talk with a self-deprecating Al-Anon joke. And this is the one I'm going to have for you today. All right. So these two Al-Anon ladies are sitting in a bar, minding their own business. There's like just one crowd that's good on, right? It's one joke for one crowd. I love coming and talking about Al-Anon. Al-Anon has been just an amazing experience for me. It's been rich, it's been deep, it's been exciting. I just have so much to say, and they only give me about 50 minutes to talk about it. But wow, what an experience it's been for me. And I love coming and talking, you know, on conferences, like sponsoring people and going and speaking are like my two favorite forms of service. And it's just, you don't know what's going to happen. You just go where it is a guy wants you to go, and you give your talk, and you hope it works out okay. A couple years ago, maybe 3 years ago or so, I got a call from Alaska. And I looked at my phone, and there was a guy in real estate calling me from Alaska. He's trying to sell me something, I'm guessing. I call him, and he says, hey, we're having a roundup. We'd love to have you come up to Alaska. And I go, oh, right, I'm going to Alaska. I've made the big time. I said, when would you like me? He says, February. And I said, oh. Well, boy, I made it all right. I'm going to Anchorage, Alaska in February. And the only thing that's really sort of ironic about that, it was colder at home than it was in Anchorage, Alaska. We had more snow, too. And so I went there, and sort of a similar situation. It took me a long time to get there, but I got there and gave my talk. And at the time, I was living in Concord, New Hampshire. And after I gave my talk, this young man comes up to me, 1 year sober, and he says, oh, Bud, I loved your talk. And you know what? I'm from Concord, New Hampshire, and my mom still lives there, and she really needs Al-Anon. And And I said, well, and I'm thinking to myself, how do you get to Anchorage, Alaska from Concord, New Hampshire? But I guess it kind of makes sense, because if you keep doing geographics, eventually it's, you get to a place where it's, you either get sober or you learn Russian, right? It's like, what now? And so I said, yeah, well, tell her that I'm going to give her a call, and there's a meeting on Wednesday night at the hospital. I'll pick her up and I'll take her. And so he called his mom. I called his mom. I said, I'm going to come pick you up on Wednesday. The meeting's at 7 o'clock. She says, well, I could just meet you there. And I said, no, you won't. You won't. So, but if I'm at your doorstep, you will. And so it turns out she was like 2 blocks from my house. And so I drove around the corner and I picked her up. At first she said, oh, I was going to call you until I couldn't go. And I said, well, see, I told you. And I put her in the car. And the thing is, that Concord Hospital meeting, that was my last night of going to that meeting, because I was moving to Deering that weekend. So it was really my last time going to that meeting. And so it was my only opportunity really to take her to that meeting. And we had a nice conversation. She talked about how much she loved her son and how grateful she was that he was sober. But you could tell she could use some program. And so I took her to the hospital. She immediately saw somebody from her Zumba class, and they started to have a conversation, and I left the meeting. And I didn't go back to that meeting. But the thing is that's not my job is not about results. My job is to carry the message and do God's work, and God takes care of results, right? Is the results are in, and they're none of my business. I just do footwork. And that's what's the great thing. When God says you need to go somewhere, I'm going to go somewhere, because that's what I was taught to do. So I'm happy to be here. So by way of identification, I'm going to tell you how I got here. I'm not going to hopefully not spend a ton of time on that, but people are always interested. And so what happened is that I married an alcoholic of that type. You'll hear them talk about that. I'm an alcoholic of that type. She was an alcoholic of that type. And this is not to say I found an alcoholic of that type because I was an emotional rock of Gibraltar. I was not. I was nutty. I mean, I came into that relationship with this terrible need to be needed. I just had to be needed. And I needed to find somebody who needed people. And so I found an alcoholic who needed a person like me. And I didn't know it was alcoholism. I didn't know what it was. But we had this relationship, and I knew it was kind of crazy and weird, and a lot of wacky stuff was going on. And so I decided I would cure it by marrying her. And that doesn't work generally, but I didn't know that at the time. I thought, well, really, she'll settle down when she's married and has more responsibilities or something, and my deeper love, But I still didn't know it was alcoholism. I didn't know what it was. I thought maybe it was a mental problem. For a while, I thought it was the worst PMS in the world. I mean, I had charts. I was trying to figure out, is there a pattern? But no, there's no pattern. It was one day it would be terrible, and the next day it'd be okay, and then 3 days okay, and 3 days terrible, no pattern, complete chaos. And I didn't know what it was. And what happened was that on the day after we came back from our first anniversary trip, I got a phone call at 7 o'clock in the morning, and it was my wife at the time. And she said, and I said, yeah, what's up? And she says, I've been in a car accident. And I said, oh, are you okay? She says, yes, I'm okay, but I'm getting arrested. I said, for what? She says, I don't know. And I'm like, you don't know? They're not telling you? And she says, no, but you're going to have to pick me up. And this was in Orange County, California. And so they took her, the California Highway Patrol took her to this place. And I don't know anything about any of this stuff, right? I'm pretty innocent when it comes to anything that's outside of the law. I'm a law follower. And so I've never really had any, dealings with the law enforcement community. Good God. And so I don't even know where the CHP is or where they hold people like that. And so I'm calling a lawyer, and I'm going down. So then I go down there to get her, and I'm talking to this giant California Highway Patrolman, and I'm saying, yeah, I would come to get my wife. And he says, well, I can't let her out yet. And he said, and I said, why? And he says, well, she's still drunk. And I said, it's 9 o'clock in the morning. And he said, yeah, I know. This makes no sense to me. I said, when are you letting her out? It says, when she sobers up, come back at 3. And I said, all right. And so I went home and I called a couple more lawyers and then I went back at 3 o'clock to go get her. And you know what? I've never had anybody be so angry at me for them being arrested. Have you had that experience where you're getting yelled at because you're picking them up from a drunk tank in the California Highway Patrol and suddenly you're somehow responsible for this happening? And it was awful. And, the car was dented up and she had, other stuff and mess that came with that. And so we got home and she was sobered and she had calmed down a little bit. And so what I did is as soon as, a day had passed, I said, we're going to have a serious talk. And I was serious. I was firm. And I said to her, you're not drinking anymore. And she looked me in the eyes and said, okay. Like, oh, it's not that hard. You just have to be firm. And you know what? She stopped drinking in front of me. Altogether. Not that she was, she was drinking before, obviously, at 7 o'clock in the morning. But to me, it didn't seem like that was problematic drinking. That was just bad decision making. But because of my firm conversation with this alcoholic, she had now become sober. And I was happy to say that I thought that I had solved the problem. But it turned out the problems just got worse. And in the course of that conversation with her, when she got arrested that first time, and in about 2 months, I got to see more members of the law enforcement community coming to my house for a variety of reasons. There was a cop across the street who came over a couple times too. And I thought, wow, this is like the drinking has stopped, but the chaos is worse. And it didn't occur to me that a person would tell you that they weren't going to drink anymore and they would drink anyway. It just didn't occur to me. I said, why would you do that? And so there was this one week in March, and she could not get off the couch for anything, and I mean for anything, and all the mess that comes with that. And I'm like, well, what is the problem? And she said, I'm really depressed. And I said, well, that's terrible. And she had this job that she was barely holding on to because when she got arrested, she was, anyway. And so I did what I thought was pretty much a logical thing. I went down to her work to explain to them. Right? It sounds so crazy right now. But at the time, it made a ton of sense. I'm going to go down there and kind of explain everything to her boss. And then, and then she'll give her a break and understand how depressed my wife really is. And so I went down there and I talked to this boss. And she looked at me with those sad eyes, sort of the sad eyes I saw in that California Highway Patrolman. And she looked at me with those sad eyes and says, oh, she's not depressed. She's drunk. Well, no, I had a firm talk. We had a firm talk. How can you say that? How do you even know that? And she says, well, she comes to work drunk and says, I'm drunk. There's really no good argumentation after that, right? There's no yeah buts after that. So I drive home where she's still on the couch, and I go to the closet, and I just look a little, not that hard. I mean, really just a little. And there are 2 boxes of Franzia wine in there. And I pull them out, and I take them where she is in the couch, and I put them down in front on the TV set with this fabulous Al-Anon aha. Aha! Her eyes pop open like I brought 2 unicorns out, How'd those get there? Where did you find those? I go, they're in your closet. Right? And boxes are great if you're going to hide in the closet. They all stack and you can't measure. And there's lots of good reasons for these boxed wines. And they're cheap. And the thing about it is that later on, whenever she did go out the second time, did get sober, it was on vanilla extract. And can I tell you the difference in price between getting drunk on vanilla extract and getting drunk on Franzia wine? How did this happen to me? I was in program for 2.5 years, and I should have figured this one out. So I told her, I said, we're going to go to your therapist. And I called her therapist. This is all on the same day, right? So she's not going to work. I go to her work. I find out she's drunk. I go to the closet. I call her therapist. I said, I need an appointment. I need an appointment at 3 o'clock. She says, okay. So I go down there. I pour her into the car. I pour her out of the car. I take her into the therapist. I sit her down in front of the therapist, and I said, okay, fix her. And she had these sad eyes, and she looked at me, and she says, yeah, it sounds like she's got a drinking problem, but you need help too. I go, let me explain again, all right? Blah, 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 her, she, la, la, la. And she said, no, I know, but you're going to need help. And so I'm going to give you the name of Al-Anon. I'm going to give you the number for Al-Anon. All right, so I took this stupid number for Al-Anon, really discussed it with this therapist, and drove her home, sat her down, went to the phone, called Al-Anon in front of her so that she would know what is happening to me. I have to call a 12-step program. So I call. And, this nice lady, probably with sad eyes, answers the phone. And she says, and I say, hey, I think maybe I'm living with an alcoholic. I'd like you to send me some literature. And she says, all of our literature is at meetings. And I was like, well, that's really inconvenient. I have to go to a meeting to get literature, which is a lie. It's a total lie. You can get literature anywhere. But this was a lie. Damn, Al-Anons are liars. And so I said, okay, where's a meeting? And she says, there's one tonight. And the thing is, I've painted myself into a corner I can't get out of. I'm doing it all in front of her, right? And so I'm like, oh no. It's like, now what do I do? And I go, tonight. Okay, what time and where? He says, it's 7 o'clock. And it's about 3 miles from your home. I went, oh. This is like, it's like, well, okay, I'm going to go. Thank you. And I hang up the phone. And I said, I'm going to an Al-Anon meeting because of you. And I think she was passed out again. And so I got my stuff. I found this church in La Habra, California. And La Habra's not super close to me, which was good because I was afraid people would see me going into this church, into this 12-step meeting. I thought people would see me and judge me, that all my friends would see me. I had no friends, right? Alcoholism basically took my life away. I had nobody, nothing. You could have held my birthday party in a phone booth. The phone booths are these things they used to have phones in. And you would open, and they're really small, right? So joke's going to be good for a little longer. So I go into this, similar to what we've heard before. I went to a basement of a church. I walk into the room. I look around, and there's 11 women and one elderly gentleman. And I'm like, oh, it's a woman problem, right? This is what's happened, is that not only I have to go to Al-Anon, it turns out that only women go to Al-Anon, except for that older gentleman. And they had a visitor, and he was a guy, but I don't know what a visitor is. It's like, if you're there, you're there for a good reason, I guess. I don't know. But I went, oh no, a woman thing. So all right, I'll sit down. It was the first Wednesday. This was in 1996, first Wednesday of March. So they're doing a step study, reading out of this green-white book, doing a third step study. They said, passing it around, you could read a paragraph. And they got to me, and I read it, and I don't remember what I read, but I do remember a couple of things about it. The word God was mentioned a lot. I mean, it was like, blah, blah, God, blah, 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 God, blah, 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 God. And then it just occurred to me that, oh, my God, God people. It's a woman God thing. And it was that night. That I was sitting in an Al-Anon meeting that night, from going that morning to explain why she was depressed and to her therapist. I was in an Al-Anon meeting with a bunch of ladies talking about God. And I was like, my life has gone to hell in a handbasket. I cannot believe this is happening. And they said I could share. And And I was like, I think this is going to be really hard for me. And that's it. I know the first thing I shared in an Al-Anon meeting, but I'll always remember saying that because the thing about that was that I didn't say I couldn't do it. I didn't say it was going to be impossible. I didn't say there's just no possibility of me ever coming back to a meeting ever again. I just said, unbeknown to myself, is that it would be something that I might try. It's like that little sliver of light that Matt was talking about, this little bit of willingness that suddenly came into my life to do something different. And there's all these people in that room who I didn't quite understand what they were saying, and some of them did those sad eyes things at me. And they told me I could go to other meetings. They said they're all different. And they didn't want my money. They gave me free literature. And they do have it at meetings, apparently. And I walked out of there with really just consciously with a decision of never going back. I said, I'm not going back there. I can't connect with these people. But then I read the literature. It's such a bad idea, right? And they give you the newcomers packet all the time, and you say to yourself, is that you hope that they read it. Well, I read mine. I read it that night. So boom, 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 boom. So that night, I read The Guide to the Family of the Alcoholic, and in there it said a couple of things that struck me at that moment. And one of those things was that the one person was sane in the family, there'd be hope for everybody. If one person would be sane, there'd be hope for the whole family. And I knew I was insane. I knew I was going insane. And I had a family. She had 3 kids from a previous marriage. I had 2 kids from a previous marriage with these 5 kids, this alcoholic. It was a train wreck. And so I knew that I needed to get sane. And I read in there my life. My life was being printed out. There's a statement in there about how the alcoholic acts like a little god, and that we all cater to this little god. And it's like, this is the way our life was. And whenever you read about your life in a pamphlet, it gives you the idea that it's possible that you are not the only one with the problem. That somebody went to the trouble of printing it up and handing them out to people. And so I was like, oh, this is my life. And so 10 days later, I went to another meeting closer to my home, and about a mile away, and I went back with a different attitude. And this time my attitude was that I'm here to get sane. How do I do that? I did a couple of smart things early on, and I didn't recognize it at first, but I do now. I was desperate. Part of it was the desperation, and part of it was just the willingness to try to do something different. But I did a couple of smart things. One thing that I did is that it said, learn all you can about alcoholism. It surprises me how many people in Al-Anon don't learn all they can about alcoholism. They learn a lot about the alcoholic. They'll tell you everything about the alcoholic, what they're wearing, what they smell like, how tall they are, how short they are, what they're wearing, what they're not wearing, how much money they're making. They know a lot about alcoholics, but not much about alcoholism. And so I said, well, where am I going to find out about alcoholism? Well, it turned out that my wife, after she got that first arrest, had been going to a lot of meetings because she had a court card. And she was going to meetings, and she was bringing home a big book from every meeting that she went to. And I'm like, how does that happen? She had 6 of them. I thought maybe they gave her one for every 2 steps, right? So she has this stack of big, I can see it now. Like, she would go to a meeting and say, oh, is this your first meeting? And she would say yes, and they give her a book, and then she'd go to a different meeting. Is this your first meeting? Yes. And give her another. She just didn't want people to know she'd been to more meetings. I'm guessing. I never really asked her about it. This is all conjecture. But well, the important thing is there's 6 big books in my house. And so I can I borrow one of those? And she says, no. So alcoholic, right? I've got 5 is good, 6 is better. So I took one anyway. And I don't think she could remember how many she had. And so I read that, and that was really helpful. So that was one of the smart things that I did early on in recovery. The other thing was that I did that I thought was pretty smart is that I worked the program that I wanted her to work. Because I was, saying, I had a list of things that she could do. We already had the firm talk, so I had a new list. And I knew what that list looked like. Go to meetings, get a sponsor, work the steps, be of service. I knew what kind of a program she would need to have in order to get sober, but I'd had to be willing to do it myself. So I just felt like a huge hypocrite if I wasn't willing to do it myself, because I'd already been to those first 2 meetings, was ruined by you people, right? Ruined. And so I knew. And what I did is that after I realized that that wasn't going to work with her, and all this is all happening simultaneously. Like I do dumb stuff, report it to my meeting, they laugh. I go do less dumb stuff and come back. I mean, that's really what's going on. And so I instead put my energy into my program. And I went to meetings. I went to 3 meetings a week. I got it took a while for me to get a sponsor, but I got a sponsor. Not my fault. They kept saying no. With sad eyes, right? Oh, no. And I got a job. And I tried to make the program a part of my everyday life. I poured myself into the program because I knew I needed to be sane, no matter what happened with the alcoholic, because I was not confident that she was going to live. She was hell-bent on killing herself one way or the other. And I just needed to be ready. Need to be ready for her sobriety or her death. And I couldn't do that by sitting home and twiddling my fingers. I had to go to work, and I went to work. And I went to work with a fervor. And so first job I got was treasurer of our Sunday night Brea meeting. We were pulling down a good $10 a week. I was in charge. I was writing, I was leaving money for the church. I was paying the babysitter. I was paying for some Oreo cookies. But the thing about it is I was in the program. It put me in the program. It's that service commitment. If you go to a conference, get a job. If you're going somewhere and they need some help, because it just makes you a part of it. And so I became a part of Al-Anon. And the thing is that there was the same situation. I was, 1 or 2 guys and 12 women. And it doesn't change that much, although I have noticed that if you're a guy and you stick around in a meeting, another guy does show up. And then another guy shows up because there are 2 guys there, right? And so it was always, this idea of what am I bringing to a meeting and what can I, and obviously focusing on the similarities instead of the differences. And I started to get help. And that terrible, horrible spiral of me going down and going down and going down started to slow down, and then I started to feel better and better and better. The thing is that it turned out that if I'm not the problem, there's no solution, right? If I'm not the problem, if I think that some other person, place, thing, time has to change in order for me to be better, it's not going to happen, right? So I'm the one who has to change. Either change my attitude, change my situation, move to one side, whatever that I need to do. And I learned this as I was working the steps, is that all of my problems were first step problems. Like every time I'm up against something, I just have to ask myself, what do I want power over? I want power over this. I want power over that. And I don't have any power. And you hear alcoholics talk about it all the time, is that lack of power is our dilemma. And I really think for an Al-Anon, it's always the case. I'd like to be able to change other people, places, and things. I want results to happen a particular way. And when it doesn't happen, I get upset. I get angry. I get snarky. I get sarcastic. I get cynical. And the thing is that doesn't change anybody. It has a huge effect on me, but it doesn't change anybody. You know what? The world doesn't care about my lack of acceptance of it. It just runs right over you. So I started. So the thing was that I didn't really believe in God, but I also thought you don't even see the word till the 3rd step, so I could drop out. Right? So, and I tell people that today. They come to me and they'll say, I got a problem with the God thing. And I says, we haven't even worked the 1st step. You could drop out, by the time we get to the 2nd step, you could be gone. So let's just do the 1st step. And it turns out if you do the 1st step and you understand you're not God, there's room for a God, right? That's what happened to me. Suddenly a vacuum opens up. Oh, it turns out I'm powerless? Turns out that I can't do this stuff or my life becomes unmanageable? Well, what are we going to do? What's the solution to that? And they go, let's go to 2. And I'm like, well, okay. I can understand the concept of a higher power now because I've been to a few meetings. I would feel crappy before a meeting and better after. Before a meeting, I'm crappy. After, I feel great. That's not me. I was crappy all day. Go to a meeting, I felt better afterwards. That's a power greater than myself. Well, that's something I can swallow, right? A higher power. Oh my gosh, I'm going to make it to step 2. I was pretty thrilled. But here's what happened between 2 and 3 is that I started to understand this idea that I'm really not smart enough to figure out God. It turns out there's a ton of other really, really smart people who put a ton of effort into understanding God. You read 10 pages of St. Thomas Aquinas, that guy spent a ton of time thinking about God. All kinds of ways of thinking about God that I don't even understand. And I was like going, well, I don't know that I understand God, but I know I need one. I'm just too sick to not have one. And it turns out you don't have to understand God to use God. Turns out you could have a half-assed God and do pretty well, right? Just a everyday pedestrian God will get you through a ton of shit, right? It doesn't have to be anything super special. My sponsor was a doorknob guy, man. You know, those doorknob God men. You know, that God could be a doorknob, which always I never quite understood. And I talked to him about it once, and he said, "Well, it's nice because God, doorknobs let you through doors. They're in every room. He's counting." So I kind of saw what he was talking about, but he did pretty well with the doorknob God. And so it turns out what I could do is I could create a God I was comfortable with today that I could create later. So this idea of a heuristic God, a God where I have a concept that works for now, but then I can do a new concept. Because I kept going to meetings, I kept hearing about your God, and we'd come in with all of our higher powers, and you feel the higher powers kind of hovering above everybody. And somebody shared about how great their higher power was, and I said, I like that feature. I'm going to take that feature for my higher power. That's a pretty cool feature. And the thing is that by having a God with a lot of cool features means that he cares about what's going on with me. I couldn't do it with the cosmic God. I know some people are more comfortable with the cosmic God. Like, I got a guy I'm sponsoring now, and he's got a really cosmic kind of thing going on. And I'm like going, yeah, I understand you've got this really great construct, but it's not helping you with your worrying about your bills, right? That cosmic God doesn't care that you need to pay your electric bill. Says, my God cares about my electric bill. My God cares about whether I'm going to be, whether my flight's going to get in on time or not. My God cares about, I need that kind of God, an intimate, personal relationship with God. My God has my picture on his refrigerator. And he walks by it when he's getting something cold to drink and says, he's so cute. Yeah, what a cutie. That's my higher power. Because
yeah, hug. Yes, sir. You got it, man.
Get those buckets passed around out there. Hi, everybody. I'm Bud. It's great. Can we do it one more time? I just love it. Hi, everybody. I'm Bud. I don't know. I love that. You get to hear your name. I think you get endorphins or something when you hear your name, especially like a big crowd like this. My name is Bud. I'm from Deering, New Hampshire. My home group is the Antrim Wednesday night step study. If you're in the area, stop by. If you're on your way to France. I have a list of people to thank. I always get worked up and forget stuff you're supposed to do. I want to thank people. I want to thank the committee for having me here. I want to thank Jason, who's been great. He's been texting me, got me a shirt, he got me a mug. I want to thank Patty for asking me to be here. Thank you, Patty. And I want to thank Ara for being my hostess. She came to the airport and picked me up and drove 2.5 hours. I left yesterday woke up at 3:20 in the morning, got here 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So it was like 12 hours. I went to Philly. I went to Phoenix. I went to Sacramento. I rode in the car for 2.5 hours, listened to Lawrence of Torrance, and crashed. And it was, and the thing is, they always say you need to go to any lengths, and that was close to it. I was so happy to be able to get here to hear Larsine talk in the last 15 minutes with Larsine. I love Larsine. It was she's always got a terrific talk. And then Lawrence of Torrance last night, it was particularly funny and touching and poignant. And just now we got to hear Matt. And I got to tell you, Matt, I'm so glad you're out of the thieving business. Because you look like the kind of guy who would steal your wallet but help you for 2 hours to find it, right? I'll help you, dude. It's like, oh, he's such a nice guy. And I'm looking forward to hearing Jennifer and Judge John. And I got a great gift basket in my room, which was terrific. I dug through it. I got a nice mug and a shirt. They also gave me Kleenex. I don't know if that was just an Al-Anon thing. You always see a Kleenex box, right, when you walk to an Al-Anon meeting, and you're almost sure they don't do it at AA, but boy, in Al-Anon, you got all these Kleenex boxes everywhere. Thank you for that. And I want to thank my partner, Molly. She, has to put up with me being gone and driving me to the airport and picking me up at airports. And she's not in program, and she doesn't quite understand what I do. But she's very supportive. And without her, I couldn't be here. There, I did my thanking parts. I always like to start my talk with a self-deprecating Al-Anon joke. And this is the one I'm going to have for you today. All right. So these two Al-Anon ladies are sitting in a bar, minding their own business. There's like just one crowd that's good on, right? It's one joke for one crowd. I love coming and talking about Al-Anon. Al-Anon has been just an amazing experience for me. It's been rich, it's been deep, it's been exciting. I just have so much to say, and they only give me about 50 minutes to talk about it. But wow, what an experience it's been for me. And I love coming and talking, on conferences, like sponsoring people and going and speaking are like my two favorite forms of service. And it's just, you don't know what's going to happen. You just go where it is that God wants you to go, and you give your talk, and you hope it works out okay. A couple years ago, 3 years ago or so, I got a call from Alaska. And I looked at my phone, and there was a guy in real estate calling me from Alaska. He's trying to sell me something, I'm guessing. I call him, and he says, hey, we're having a roundup. We'd love to have you come up to Alaska. And I go, all right, I'm going to Alaska. I've made the big time. I said, when would you like me? He says, February. And I said, oh. Well, boy, I made it all right. I'm going to Anchorage, Alaska in February. And the only thing that's really sort of ironic about that, it was colder at home than it was in Anchorage, Alaska. We had more snow, too. And so I went there, and I sort of a similar situation. It took me a long time to get there, but I got there and gave my talk. And at the time, I was living in Concord, New Hampshire. And after I gave my talk, this young man comes up to me, 1 year sober, and he says, oh, Bud, I loved your talk. And you know what? I'm from Concord, New Hampshire, and my mom still lives there, and she really needs Al-Anon. And I said, well, and I'm thinking to myself, how do you get to Anchorage, Alaska from Concord, New Hampshire? But I guess it kind of makes sense, because if you keep doing geographics, eventually it's, you get to a place where it's, you either get sober or you learn Russian, right? It's like, what now? And so I said, yeah, well, tell her that I'm going to give her a call, and there's a meeting on Wednesday night at the hospital. I'll pick her up and I'll take her. And so he called his mom. I called his mom. I said, I'm going to come pick you up on Wednesday. The meeting's at 7 o'clock. She says, well, I could just meet you there. And I said, no, you won't. You won't. So, but if I'm at your doorstep, you will. And so it turns out she was like 2 blocks from my house. And so I drove around the corner and I picked her up. At first she said, oh, I was going to call you until I couldn't go. And I said, well, see, I told you. And I put her in the car. And the thing is, that Concord Hospital meeting, that was my last night of going to that meeting, because I was moving to Deering that weekend. So it was really my last time going to that meeting. And so it was my only opportunity really to take her to that meeting. And we had a nice conversation. She talked about how much she loved her son and how grateful she was that he was sober. But you could tell she could use some program. And so I took her to the hospital. She immediately saw somebody from her Zumba class, and they started to have a conversation, and I left the meeting. And I didn't go back to that meeting. But the thing is that's not my job is not about results. My job is to carry the message and do God's work, and God takes care of results, right? Is the results are in, and they're none of my business. I just do footwork. And that's what's the great thing. When God says you need to go somewhere, I'm going to go somewhere, because that's what I was taught to do. So I'm happy to be here. So by way of identification, I'm going to tell you how I got here. I'm not going to hopefully not spend a ton of time on that, but people are always interested. And so what happened is that I married an alcoholic of that type. You'll hear them talk about that. I'm an alcoholic of that type. She was an alcoholic of that type. And this is not to say I found an alcoholic of that type because I was an emotional rock of Gibraltar. I was not. I was nutty. I mean, I came into that relationship with this terrible need to be needed. I just had to be needed. And I needed to find somebody who needed people. And so I found an alcoholic who needed a person like me. And I didn't know it was alcoholism. I didn't know what it was. But we had this relationship, and I was I knew it was kind of crazy and weird, and a lot of wacky stuff was going on. And so I decided I would cure it by marrying her. And that doesn't work generally, but I didn't know that at the time. I thought, well, really, she'll settle down when she's married and has more responsibilities or something. And my deeper love said, oh, hey, you know what? You have a lot of energy. Why don't you run our next convention? That's not exactly how it went. I said, I said a lot, and they said maybe you'd be interested. And I said, well, see if you can find somebody else, because I've been here 3 weeks. And then the area chair hunted me down, and he said, I can't find anybody else. Will you do it? And I've always said yes to service. And so I said, yeah, I'll take care of it. I didn't know a soul in Vermont, but it was great because I got to know everybody in Vermont. I went to meetings, I went to district meetings, I went to assemblies. I told them this is what we're going to do, and this is where we're going to have it. And I can hold a convention for you for $500, all right? The first one, right? You got to take care of it after that, but I can do it for $500. And they gave me $500, and I put on a convention, and 120 people showed up, and it was a great time. And and then the following year, my sponsee did it, because, well, that's what happens when you're getting sponsored by me. You do something like that. And then the following year, I had to do it again. So I spent 3 years doing the Vermont convention. Then I became the district rep for my area. But I tell you what was really cool about Vermont, and it didn't even occur to me when I got to Vermont, is that's where Bill Wilson was born. Turns out Bill Wilson was born a half an hour south of where I was living. Turns out the meeting I was going to is across the street from Bill Wilson's childhood home, right? From the time whenever he left Dorset and came up with his parents to live in Rutland for a few years. He was living on the corner. I was in the church across the street. And then when his parents split up, he went back to his parents in Dorset. And so I went down to Dorset. And I tell you, it's quite a thing. If you haven't been down there or up there, go. Right? Because you go there, and that's where Bill was born, at a bar, right? They still have the bar there. They have the stupid bar. It's up on the wall. And there's all these license plates with terrible slogans on them everywhere that people bring with them. And it's just this magic of being where Bill Wilson was born, and then his library is over on the other side. It's an amazing thing. And I'll tell you, a quick story about it. There's 2 events that they have out there, okay? In May, they have Pioneer Day. And Pioneer Day is to celebrate Lois, because Lois is buried out there. You have to know where to go and where to find it. It's not marked. They're very clear about not marking their graves. So you have to know somebody who knows somebody to find it. She's buried next to a guy named Bill. And William, I should say. And they have this event, and it's very nice. You go out there on a Sunday morning. It's on a Sunday morning. And it's a nice little event. There's probably about 50 Al-Anons show up, a few, dual members. And we say a little prayer, and some people share, and they might leave some items at the grave. And then, and it's nice. Just a group of Al-Anon people in sensible shoes, having this sort of poignant moment at Lois's grave. And then we go back to the Wilson house and have a potluck and eat a lot of macaroni and cheese, because they love macaroni and cheese in New England. A month later, they have a similar event for the guy who's buried next to Lois. And it's a different event. And what happens is that people come from all over. And because it's in June, the weather's pretty good. So that means a lot of them are coming on motorcycles. All right? I don't know what it is about you people, but I don't know if you get sober and you get a motorcycle, but it seems like they got a lot of motorcycles. And so you go out there, and there's probably 200 people, 2 buses, a row of motorcycles, and a sea of black. And somebody's sharing, you can't hear anything because there's too many people. And there's tears and that kind of stuff. It's an amazing thing to witness, really. And then they all go back, all down to the Wilson house. What's funny about it is that the next day I was at work, and I was talking to a colleague and asked her how her weekend was. And she was like saying, oh, it was great. I went down to Manchester, and I was coming back through Dorset, and I saw the most amazing thing. And I said, oh, really? What did you see? And she says, well, apparently a motorcycle gang leader died. So Yeah, there's differences, between the groups. But what a beautiful thing to see and to witness. Got to see Emerald Lake where Lois and Bill had first met. This is all this history that's involved there. And also I've been to Dr. Bob's Childhood Home, which is up in St. Johnsbury in Vermont. So it was like all of a sudden I've landed in this place where there's all this history of recovery. And I got to speak at the Wilson House a couple of times. It was really an honor. After I was a DR, I was asking God what he wanted me to do next. And I got a couple of phone calls from past delegates in Vermont, and they asked me if I'd stand for delegate. And you're asking for God's will, and 3 people call you. And you go like, okay, it's clear. And so I stood for delegate, and not knowing whether I get it or not get it, but that's not my job. Results, God takes care of results. I did get voted in, but it was because nobody ran against me. And because everybody's like, well, I don't want that job. And I became delegate of Vermont. And boom, my world opened up. I mean, all of a sudden, I'm in the World Service. I'm getting a buttload of emails from a lot of people I don't know. I'm seeing all kinds of stuff. I mean, just tons of information coming at me. But I got to see the fellowship in a way I'd never seen it before. I showed up on that first day at the World Service Conference feeling a little cocky, right? Well, I'm from Vermont, and I was, but when I went in that room, it was just such a feeling of awe, right? This sort of sense it's all happening here with this group of people, selected from their areas, and we're the largest group conscience. It was just an amazing thing to be a part of. And that wasn't what I was looking for when I got here, right? I was just, to me, it was like, how do I get her sober? Or how do you hide a body? And you guys were laughing, so I thought you knew one of those things. But that's what I was looking for, but I would have cheated myself. Right? I would have cheated myself out of so many experiences if that's really all I wanted out of the experience of coming to Al-Anon. But here I was at the World Service Conference. In my last year, they asked me to be the spiritual speaker. And I'm like going, well, this is a huge honor for me to be here, selected by my peers to give a talk about Al-Anon. It was amazing. And it's always hard when you let go of being a delegate because you're just involved with everything, and all of a sudden you're not involved with anything. And so I asked God, what do you want me to do next? And fortunately, we had the Northeastern Regional Delegates meeting. They wanted me to chair it. And so I said, okay, I'll chair that. Once again, not an election, just I volunteered and nobody wanted to oppose me. And so I got to do that. But the thing that happened was that in that time, there was an email that went out to some of the delegates saying, we're starting a conference in New Mexico for Native Americans. And we're looking for people who have experience in running conferences and are also Native American. I'm a member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation of Shawnee, Oklahoma, and it had always never occurred to me that this would be something I could participate in. So I contacted them and said, yeah, I'd like to be a part of the committee. And then when I got on the committee, they were like, oh, well, we're looking, it was actually a brainchild of Don C. Some of you know Don C. He's a big AA dude and does a lot of work with Native Americans. Don C. wanted to do it, but Don's a dual member, and Don said didn't think it would be right for him to chair it. So he was looking for somebody who was just Al-Anon. And the other man that he was working with was Norm, and Norm was Al-Anon, but he was not Native. And so really by default, I became the chair of the first Native American Al-Anon conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico 3 years ago. We're having our third one coming up this year in April, in the first weekend of April, right? And you're all invited. We need your support. We want you to come. We have a big drum. Last year, the big drum came, and I want to play a little bit of our morning song for you, because I can tell you that when you're an Al-Anon member and you're standing there and you're hearing this morning song, the pounding of the big drum in your soul, you're thinking to yourself, God, just the spiritual power of this particular moment. And what we're trying to do is carry this message to the people that are hard to reach, that are hard for us to reach, because of the barriers that they have and we have, that are not on reservations and not on Indian land. And Don said, if I had thought about it first, I would always have approached the Native women first and the Native families first, because those are the people who have the power in those communities. And that's who we're trying to reach. We're trying to reach these communities so that we can help these families who are so underserved. And this convention is what we do to build a conversation around. I get phone calls from reservations, and they say, we're interested in coming. We want to send a health person, someone in our mental health facility over to you. Do you have workshops on how to start meetings on res land? And I say, yes, we do. Please send them. This is remarkable work for me. And I have a great committee. Juanita Hughes on my committee, Don C's on my committee, Judd L's on my committee. I've got past delegates, past trustees, past World Service Office employees on my committee. It's a joy to work with, but just the ability to be able to say I'm making some kind of a difference. It's just been an amazing experience for me. I'll tell one last story. I was at the Concord Hospital. Because they were having assembly there. It was about 2 years ago. And I wanted to go to this assembly because I knew there was going to be problems. Some personalities didn't like each other, so I was going to go with some popcorn and see what would happen. Because there's, and it was really interesting. But anyway, I was trying to find the assembly, and I was looking at this board, and I was trying to figure out what room it was in. A voice behind me says, "Bud?" And I go like, "Yes." And I didn't recognize this person right away, but that's not unusual. I get around a little bit, and she says, "Bud, you remember me?" And I go, "No, I don't remember you." And she says, "I'm the woman you took to that first meeting a year ago at the Concord Hospital. I'm the GR for my group on Tuesday. My son's 2 years sober and married. So sometimes you get to see some of the trees that you get to plant." Thanks for letting me share.
We hope you enjoyed this recording. If you are interested in other speaker tapes or CDs from AA or Al-Anon, please contact us at Sound Solutions, toll free 1-877-893-2777, or visit us on the web at soundsolutionsrecording.com. We are also available to cover your recording and sound system needs. Thank you for allowing us to be of service and carrying the message.